What's up, Fragrance Connoisseurs? We're in a little different format. I wanted to do it a little differently because on the IG side, when I start with the music, people don't realize that it's a full show. So we're going to give some music, get all ready and backstage. We've got James Koroma backstage. And so we're going to give a little music. Then we'll come back with everybody and I'll introduce James Koroma and Koroma's Aromas. All right, we'll be right back.
Can I sniff it? Yes, you can. 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 Well, we gone. Go on. Can I sniff it? To all the people who like frags like Charm City does. Made this track so you really know what live was. Come together over fragrances. That's the why, cuz getting love and support from the vibers. Put your sense of the day in the chat, cuz no wrong sense where whatever and for just because. Positivity and love with a live hug. A life full of fragrance is what I love. Finding hidden gems from Dior to Rosia Dove. Negativity and fighting is what we're above. Try to diss, we throw up the hand with a big shrug. Like a card of positives, it's a plus love. If you wanna cause drama, we won't even think of us. The connoisseurs fly high like a dove. Can I sniff it? Yes, you can. 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 Can I sniff it? Yes, you can.
What's good, Fragrance Connoisseurs? We are back. So have a great show for you tonight. James Koroma from Koroma's Aromas is coming on. Young brother that's doing some great things in fragrances. Like I bought in, just the legacy, the man, the fragrances. Got a lot that I want to talk about and a lot of things that we're going to bring up. So looking into it, Nate the Great, welcome, sir. See you are here. My man IBG, welcome, welcome, welcome. Mr. Clark, welcome, sir. Scent of the day is Terra de Hermes, EDP. Mr. Esteban, Aroma Dolce, sir. Coffee to Back by Pinewood Perfumes. Nice. Never heard of that one. Habib, what is up, fam? And scent of the day is Water by Dragon Perfumes. That's another one. I have not gotten the discovery set yet, but I'm working on that one as well. Everybody's saying hello. On the IG side, we got my man Kev and my man Kix. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. So, without further ado, I want to bring to you Koroma's Aromas. I met him during Black Owned Fragrance Week. Great brother, young brother doing his thing in the fragrance community, and he's his own perfumer. We're going to talk about the man. We're going to talk about the legacy, and then we're going to talk about the brand and the fragrances. So I will introduce to everyone that doesn't know, James Koroma. Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir.
How are you all doing? My name is James Koroma. I'm happy to be here.
Good, good, good. So, is it going? So we're doing something different. Is it streaming where you are?
It is.
Is it streaming on your channel? Nice. That will be interesting. That's the first time that we've done something. So we're breaking new ground. There you go. We're breaking new ground on Instagram, streaming on multiple channels. So Esteban says everybody's saying hello, but Esteban says that he's got Koroma's Aromas sample set is on his list to get. Well worth it. Well worth it.
Absolutely.
So we're going to jump right into it. What inspired you to become a perfumer, and how did Koroma's Aroma come to life?
Okay. So I was actually inspired by my grandfather. So my grandfather was a perfumer himself. And when he was in Liberia, he would create his own fragrances. So during the Liberian Civil War, he actually traveled around Africa. He went to Nigeria, Tunisia, and a little bit of North Africa. And he was smelling around with different notes and accords. And he held on to his passion. So by the time that he came to the United States, I was about 5 years old at the time. So I would actually watch him working with notes and accords and creating his own fragrances in the basement. And as a child with a very strong sense of smell, I was taken by the notes and accords that I smelled in the fragrances that he was creating in our basement. And what was an early inspiration for me actually led to me making my own fragrances. By the time I was in middle school, I had tested all of the major fragrances as well as a lot of the products that he had made himself. Um, and once I was in college, I had taken all the wealth of knowledge that I had from shadowing my grandfather creating his own fragrances and learning from experience myself working with my own notes and accords through high school. And I actually started selling my own fragrances on campus.
So when you say tested, what do you mean when you tested all those fragrances? How did you test them out? What did you do?
So what was interesting is like I had access to a lot of products, so lots of different fragrances across the market. So that was like how I got a lot of my early exposure with different notes and accords outside of what my grandfather had been creating. Um, so I had smelled, I'd say like, most of the major fragrance houses that most people know of, I had a lot of exposure to them at an early age.
Okay.
So when people had kind of like been getting into the fragrance industry and learning more about like fragrance as a whole, when um, I feel like most people learn about it like later on in life, but for me, I had a lot of early exposure to a lot of fragrances. So like when I was in high school, I was wearing fragrances like Chanel Blue, experimenting with like scents like Gucci Guilty, um, the classics like Cool Water. Um, like I had a wide range and array of like fragrances that I had been exposed to, and I feel like that experience within itself kind of guided where I wanted to head with my creating my own scents, because after a while I wanted to create something that I hadn't smelled already.
Cool. That's interesting. I remember when Cool Water came out. I
Yeah.
remember when Dracar Noir came out and all that kind of stuff because I'm that old. But that was Dracar Noir was actually probably one of the first fragrances that it was either the first fragrance I bought myself or one of the first fragrances where I had like a full bottle. I wasn't just using my dad's bottle. So
Yeah.
and so you said you started creating fragrances in high school.
Yeah.
That is crazy. So what was the experience like? What like your first scent that you created? What was it?
So it was interesting. I had actually stumbled and I was going through like my grandfather's stuff in like the pantry. And he had like a box tucked away. And I was actually going through some of the notes and accords that he still had left over. So I was experimenting with a lot of like citrus, bergamot, um, and vanilla. And I was really trying to figure out like how could I make something that was authentic to me. And I'd also try like layering different fragrances and figuring out like how different notes and accords would work together. And at that time, it was just like a period of a lot of experimentation because I recognized like a fragrance like Gucci Guilty was just too strong for me, right? That was something that was, so I'll say this. When I think about fragrance, I think about it as like your definition without words. And what I recognized at that point was that the fragrances that I was wearing didn't necessarily speak to who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up in a room when I enter a room. So I was really just experimenting with what I felt like worked best with my body chemistry.
Okay. So I know and this is going to go a little out of order, but when you talked about too strong for you, I know the big thing right now in the fragrance community is beast mode. So what are your thoughts on that since you brought that up? What are your thoughts on beast mode fragrances and how do you think about that?
So I think that when it comes down to like heavy projection, and longevity and fragrance, I think that's a great thing, right? But I think there's a balance to it. And for me, like my style of fragrance production, I don't ever create fragrances that are going to be too strong and attacking to the nose. Because for
Okay.
me personally, I have a very strong sense of smell. So I never want to create a fragrance that if it's too strong to the point where I'm smelling it and it's giving me a headache, like I personally wouldn't wear that. So my mindset in creating scent is if I'm going to create a product, I would want to wear it personally or I wouldn't sell it. So I think that I create for, um, I would say, people who share the same philosophy in scent, where it's like, you know, you want a fragrance that has longevity. You want a scent that's going to project well enough where it's like people don't have to be all the way in your face in order to smell it. But I definitely don't create fragrances that are going to take up an entire room.
I didn't notice that, and even when I did uh, your fragrances as a scent of the day, because I did Montmorency and I did Ivada Vanille, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that they weren't like I explicitly said they weren't room fillers, they're not beast mode, but and I think there's a place for that, and I think that every fragrance doesn't have to just announce your presence before you even get into a room. Sometimes you want a fragrance that is closer to your immediate scent bubble instead of just projecting everywhere. So that's really cool. And I think there's a place for all of that, actually.
And I think the interesting part about it too is like depending on the scent that we're talking about, like some of them really do project very well. And the longevity of this scent is like, say for example, if you were to spray an Ivada Vanille, like the onslaught of an Ivada Vanille is very strong. However, over time, as you get down to the middle layer and the bottom layer of the scent, it isn't as like consuming as it is as the
Absolutely.
first layer is, but it lingers for a very long time, and
It
that
definitely,
longevity is something that's going to follow you for hours, literally.
definitely they last a long time. And I'm not saying that it's a weak fragrance. I'm just saying some fragrances are kind of made to just attack the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know probably your biggest influence was your grandfather, but
Mhm.
are there any other people that you looked up to or were inspired by when you started your perfume journey as far as being a perfumer?
So MFK was definitely a major influence for me. Just watching how many houses and how many major fragrances that people love in the industry that were created by his perfumery. Um,
Absolutely.
that within itself was extremely inspiring to me because when I was really doing my research behind the brands that have had like the biggest moments in fragrance, one of the major names that you see behind those fragrances is generally MFK. So outside of him, I would say Joe Malone is also another really interesting fragrance house that has inspired some of my fragrances as well, and Tom Ford as well.
Yeah, all kind of classics. All definitely some great ones up there. Um, what challenges did you face in establishing your brand?
So I feel like generally when we look at what a perfumer looks like, I think that sometimes there are stigmas to who um, people and consumers feel like they can trust. And especially since like I'm younger in the fragrance industry, I think sometimes people question the quality or question the longevity of my product or the credibility even behind my perfumery. And I think that's something that has definitely been a real factor outside of, you know, being able to storytell and really give people a perspective of like how passionate I actually am about this industry, about fragrance. And I don't know, I think over time, it's just been something where people don't know unless they see.
Hmm.
And I think that being able to pioneer in the industry as a whole is a blessing because being a young perfumer in this industry, though it's not something that we see very often. I feel like I'm a representation that it can be done and it can be done at a exceptionally well. if you have the passion, if you have the desire, and if ultimately this is something that you love, that you can fully commit yourself to fragrance.
Yeah, I guess I can understand. I will have to say I was a bit surprised when I saw your picture. I was like, man, that boy's too young for perfume. But
Yeah.
it just the things in the profession is just when I first started working in any profession, they say, "Oh, you're too young. You just need to sit down and shut up and learn from other people." But you have something that a lot of people didn't have as far as the legacy, and that's something I talked about with your grandfather. You had a legacy of not starting at the very beginning because one, you had somebody that you could talk to and discuss about fragrances and how the notes and blends and accords go together. So that's a really cool thing that a lot of people who are starting their own fragrance business or perfume as starting as a lone perfumer don't have. So that's really, really cool. That's really
Thank you.
so. And in getting into that, how did your grandfather kind of play a role in when you first started the fragrances? I know you said you found some of his notes, some of his accords, and things like that. So, did he inspire you? Did he motivate you? Did he go forward and say, "Hey, you should do this," or did he just kind of sit back and watch you just kind of delve into it yourself?
I think that it's been a combination of all of the above, honestly. So in the beginning, I really shadowed and watched him working with a lot of the fragrances that he was creating. And over time, just shadowing and learning how
Mm-hmm.
to work with notes and accords, what work, like say for example, a citrus with an amber or a woody with an oriental. I mean, with a oriental with like a floral. So like learning how to mix different notes was something that really guided my journey. And as I learned more, it's kind of like, okay, after I created the composition, I could always go to him and ask him, what do you think about this? How could I tweak this to make sure that I'm achieving the sillage that I'm going for? To then using like taking the fragrances that I'm creating and actually just asking him, okay, like, what do you think?
Okay.
Because after a certain point, I gained more perspective of where like I wanted to take my personal perfumery. So it's more so of just getting a perspective of what he thought of the scent. To now, it's gotten to a point where it's pretty hands off because I'm a whole lot more established in like my creation process. And it's more so just getting an understanding of like what does he get from this scent, or who do you envision wearing this type of fragrance. Um, it's been a very interesting journey, but I would say that without his guidance, it would like this journey would have definitely been a lot harder for me.
Okay. So you got to a point where you're like, hey, I got this. I got
Absolutely,
this.
absolutely.
So there's a question that has come from the chat, and they're saying, I know you weren't involved in Sin Explore as far
Mhm.
as you didn't have like a booth, but they say, would you consider being a part of the event?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to absolutely be present for Scent Explore 2025. I was actually going to be there last year. However, I was sick, so I wasn't able to make that event. But I definitely will be there in 2025.
Yeah, because I guess and I didn't even talk about this. Your business, you live in Harlem, right? So
Yes.
yeah, so you're established in Harlem.
Hmm.
Cool, cool. All right, we're going to get into some of the nerdy part of this, some of the things that I really like about, and what is the creative process that you have when you're designing a new fragrance?
So when it comes down to designing new fragrances, I feel like I need a lot of inspiration. Um, let's start off with Catalyst, for example.
Okay.
Um, when I created that scent, it was the first fragrance in my collection that I solidified, and I knew this was going to be the first scent in this collection I was going to put out. And what that process looked like for me was I was looking for a fragrance that I feel like I could connect to this fragrance and recognize that for me, this isn't just a phase. Because I've created fragrances in the past that I like, I enjoy them, but after a certain duration of time, I'm no longer interested in them. It's like a phase. So I wanted something that felt more like a signature to me, that wasn't just going to be a phase, that was going to be like a scent that I could go to and just feel like this is me. So that was actually a 6 month process of experimentation with different notes that I enjoyed. Um, and I created a lot of fragrances that I didn't like in the process of trying to achieve the composition of Catalyst. But I got to a point where I focused and honed in on the notes that I really enjoyed. And number one, like amber is a really, really, really big fragrance for me. Like I enjoy smooth, clean, and aromatic scents.
Okay.
So being able to combine like an amber with a hint of oud or Mike musk and vanilla on top of lavender, which is really, really big for me. So lavender in specific is, I feel like, one of the most dominant notes in Catalyst. But that note, it was extremely important for me in that composition because when I was in college, I used a lot of lavender from an aromatherapy perspective that really helped me get to a space of like just feeling calm. I used to use it during my exams, and I recognized that I wanted a fragrance that kind of gave me that same calming feel. Because when I think about my presence, that is the way that I would like to come off in scent. So more than anything, I think that when I'm creating fragrances, I'm really looking to describe people, feelings, and emotions in scent.
That's really cool. And lavender, and a lot of times people don't realize how much scent really plays in so many different things. I mean, lavender at some of the hotels, I travel all over the country, and some of the higher end hotels, they actually have lavender that they'll put in like little sacks that you can take with you to your room for when you go to sleep and things like that, because it is a calming scent and things like that. So I mean, it's just amazing, and I've talked about it before that there are perfumers that are in cleaning products. They help design the smell of cleaning products and things like that. And just as big as you would see in a fragrance, there are sometimes, like, for whatever reason, and this may be a little out, purple fabuloso I can tell anywhere. It has such a distinctive smell that when I go someplace, I can say, "Oh yeah, they cleaned with purple fabuloso," because it's just that scent has a scent memory to me, and I know what that scent smells like. But yeah, so that's an interesting point. That's an interesting point.
And that's really big too, as well, because scent is our strongest tie to memory. And it's the smallest notes, the smallest smells that remind us of different places, moments, and memories in our lives, where all you need to smell is you're basically traveling back to that moment.
Absolutely. All right, so the questions are really going to start getting us into the fragrances now, because we got a question from the chat. Now, what I will say is Catalyst, and unfortunately, my bottles in Dallas, United States Postal Service just didn't get there in time. They delayed it. But the bottles are in Dallas. I still have all of the samples, and I made sure I had those with me. Catalyst, to me, is a very nice aromatic and Oriental Middle Eastern style. It's more aromatic than, to me, and then kind of like a deeper, denser amber. And I think this is an exceptional one. And I think this, you said this is kind of like your signature scent
Absolutely.
one. Yeah, this one is really cool. It definitely is on my list to get as well. But the question that just came up was, do you have any that represent Harlem? And I believe there is one that represents Harlem, but I want to let you talk about it. I think Montmorency kind of represents New York, but I'll let you talk about which ones you feel like represent Harlem the best.
So I think they all represent different facets of like qualities that you can find in Harlem. And when I think about, like, say for example, like a catalyst, the type of person who would wear this fragrance. Like all these fragrances are unisex as a whole, right? But when I think about character, when I think about motion and um, the story in scent, I can't say any specific one is descriptive because as a whole, there are so many archetypes of different types of people that you can run into in Harlem. It's such a dynamic, historically and culturally charged space that, I think I have yet to fully describe the full diaspora in scent. I think that I'm just now beginning to, um, I'm inching at being able to fully describe it. Like it's going to take me some time, but when I think about the fragrances that describe people, like Ivada Vanille, for example, like
Okay.
that is a very, very rich smelling scent. I feel like when I wear that aroma, it makes me feel uplifted more than anything. The saffron and catalyst makes me feel the same way. And when I think about the rich characters and people that like I've come across in Harlem, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Like making sure the scent when you put this on, like you literally get the feeling of being lifted in scent. Um, that's a great question though. Um, yeah, I'd say that they all represent different facets of people that I've come across in my time and
Okay.
my experience.
Well, and can you then kind of say what does each fragrance kind of remind you about Harlem? If all of them are kind of like Harlem based, or coming from that aspect of this is where I live, what's the part of them that gives you that scent memory?
Okay. So, like with Catalyst, for example, that definitely is representative of me by all means. I think that that reminds me of somebody who is um, distinct. You have a very clean, welcoming, and calming sillage. This is somebody who is more than likely present in a lot of spaces, interacting and dealing with lots of people. Um, when I think about like a Montmorency, this is more of a fragrance that is distinctive in like social settings where you're out at night, date night, out to the movies, like intimate settings for sure with Montmorency, because this is a fragrance that goes from elegant to savory to sexy all in one spectrum. And being able to wear that kind of fragrance, it has range, but this is something that is going to be a statement piece. And Ivada Vanille is very similar in the sense that this is an uplifting, rich fragrance. This isn't something that, I mean, you could wear it day to day, but more than anything, this is a statement scent as well, right? You're wearing this when you're going out, when you want to leave an impression on somebody and you don't want them to forget you. This is a memory maker.
Right.
Trance, trance is the type of fragrance that I feel can be a day to day scent. Um, Especially business casual. This is striking. It's clean, it's pristine, and it's very strong. Right. That's a scent that when you want to come off in, uh, I would say in a manner where you want to be recognized for your strength. When you want to be recognized for your presence, the trance is definitely going to be a route to take. Vanilla bourbon is mysterious and it's very sensual. This is mainly based for, I would say, um, in my mind, I think vanilla bourbon is perfect for intimate settings when you want to make an impression on somebody that you love the most. And the reason why I say that is because the Tunisian patchouli and vanilla bourbon is actually a natural aphrodisiac. So that scent within itself, I feel like there are so many facets to the aroma that invoke an air of mystery that this is definitely another memory maker, but something you definitely want to use in an intimate setting.
Nice, nice. So another aspect that I just want to try to evoke and understand. A lot of times when you look at, say, like Roja parfums, you can kind of tell even by smell that it's Roja parfums. Is there anything in your fragrances as a whole that you kind of lace in there as Karoma's scent DNA. This is how I put together my own stamp on my fragrance.
Every single scent has an element of vanilla. Every single scent has an element of vanilla. So if I were to look at all of them, vanilla is definitely the one combining factor to all of the scents.
Nice, nice. Um, so how long have you been kind of with K-Sense and Karoma's Aroma? How long has the company been together officially?
Since 2019.
2019. And I guess there has to have been a big change on that time because there was this little event called COVID-19 that kind of
Yes.
switched out everything. So how was there a big time of adjustment when you started in 2019 and then what happened, say February, March of 2020? How did that impact the beginning of your fragrance brand?
So in 2019, in the onslaught of COVID, it was interesting because at that point, I was actually selling my fragrances on campus. So I would go to spaces like the library and I would go to events and I would sponsor different events and table at different events. And that was how I was selling my fragrances. So it was really direct to consumer at that point. So once COVID hit, it changed the game entirely because how do you have a customer experience with your audience when you can't actually interact with them in person? It really drew me to ask myself a lot of key questions. um, if I can't meet with people in person, how am I going to transition this process where I can still reach my consumers but through the internet? And I actually decided to create my own website, and I that was the beginning of my content journey when I really started trying to learn how am I going to create experiences in scent where people may not be able to smell it, but through the experience that I'm explaining, that I'm describing, visualizing, they would be inspired to at least try or at least have some interest and curiosity to see what this fragrance smells like. As well as like one of the biggest things that I did while I was in school was really paying attention to people. I studied people very, very intently.
Mhm.
And I feel like that inspires a lot of my fragrance production because when it comes down to fragrance, more than anything, like I know when I make a scent and I'm very sure of it, who the scent is going to apply for, who is going to enjoy the scent most. Because I think that, when it, like I said previously, that um, fragrance is your definition without words. So like a catalyst, I wouldn't like I know who I would recommend a catalyst to versus who I would recommend a vanilla bourbon or Montmorency. It's all character based and personality based,
Okay.
um, and how a person will want to show up in a room. So I really started getting into the experiential side of like aroma, and that really transformed the business because what was once an in-person only experience now became something that was international. Now I'm shipping fragrances all across the world opposed to me just being in this one space and interacting with the demographic in my proximity.
Nice. So definitely, since I don't have any bottles with me, you got to show us the bottles. I think the bottles are really
Yes.
cool. But
So this is Catalyst.
there you go.
This is Trance. My bottles are a bit damaged. I bring them with me everywhere. This is Evada Vanille. And as you can see, my vanilla bourbon is literally down to the bottom. We'll get into some of the layering combos a bit later. And this is my Montmorency.
Nice.
So
Yeah, we definitely. Oh, go ahead. Go
all of
ahead.
the bottles have a gold top. And I like to explain this in the creation story as well because there's a lot of intention throughout the entire packaging of this scent. There is a space in Harlem that's actually called the Malcolm X Shabazz Masjid, and I would always walk past this space on 116th and Lenox, and I would always look up at that mosque, and there's like a big green cap, and it was always interesting to me. I always loved that architecture, and I felt like um, implementing an aspect of my inspirations growing up, walking through Harlem in my packaging was extremely important. So that's why you see these gold tops here.
Nice. Packaging definitely is an important piece of it, and presentation is much needed. And sometimes in smaller niche houses, it's not about presentation. I think you have a really solid presentation. So that's
Thank
definitely
you.
definitely nice. We got a question where it says, "How do you know when the fragrance is done? Do you have friends, family sampling them?" So I guess you got friend guinea pigs and giving you feedback.
So if the fragrance can pass my nose test, and sometimes it takes an upwards of 6 months because I have to keep smelling the fragrance on myself. I have to test the sillage and recognize whether or not I need to like change different layers of the scent. Um, but more than anything, I feel like I look to the people around me as inspiration. So my mom, my sister, um, my girlfriend, my grandfather, of course. Like the people closest to me really help and inspire like the creation of my fragrances as a whole. So I feel like if I were to create a scent and this is something that I would enjoy on them, it passes my test already and I enjoyed it on them. By all means, this is definitely going to be something that my audience would love as well. Because I'm a very harsh critic of even my own fragrances.
Okay. So in saying that, you're looking at it, and I know you started out in person. So would you look at a person and say that's catalyst, and you look at another
Absolutely.
person and say that's trance, and you look at another person and say that's Montmorency? Is that so? When you look at, say, a person's persona, their charisma, what they're wearing, how they carry themselves, does that kind of entail what kind of fragrance you would recommend to them out of your line?
Absolutely, 100%. I actually pride myself over my accuracy with this because I think that when you look at and you pay attention to body language, the way somebody shows up in the room, the way they communicate, these things apply to fragrance so well. And when you have a deep understanding of both scent, aromatherapy, and people, it's very easy to match fragrance with personality.
Okay, good deal. So another one, we got K Different Breed. Welcome. Uh, do you let your perfumes macerate? And if so, how long do you typically let them macerate?
Yes, yes, I do. Um, Most of my fragrances need at least, like, I would say 5 to 6 months of maceration. And
Oh,
that's a
wow.
part of the process of why I say it takes me 6 months to determine like whether a fragrance is going to be put out or not, because it needs that time to develop. Because a fragrance develops over time. The notes that you might smell in the first creation of a scent is going to be completely different like 2 months later, 3 months later, because the fragrance is still synthesizing. Like
Wow.
I'll give you an example. So like I told this story during Black Owned Fragrance Week, but when I created Montmorency, uh, it was really interesting because the first production of the scent, um, I would say it still had that. There's a savory aspect to Montmorency that was present at the time, but when I allowed it to macerate over time, when I smelled it again, it went from something that I really felt like was a feminine leading scent to a fragrance that was absolutely unisex. And this
Nice.
is why giving fragrance time to develop and just sit is so important, because there's different notes and accords that you're going to be able to pick up on when that scent actually has the time to just master it.
Cool. So we kind of talked about the quality and uniqueness in each creation, and we talked about how the fragrance industry has kind of changed. In general, do you feel like at times that, I mean, we go through so many things in the fragrance community now. Maceration is part of maturation of fragrances, and people are bringing out fragrances so quickly that a lot of times it doesn't even seem like the fragrance is done when you buy it. That you have to spray it, let it sit, and then come back to it. What things about the perfume industry do you think that people need to understand better as far as how they're doing certain things?
So I think the fragrance industry really profits off of miseducation as a whole. I think a lot of people don't understand the real quality in scent and what compromise like composes a quality fragrance. And I think that more than anything, that's one of the biggest reasons why I spend so much time trying to educate my audience, not just for like the consumption of my products,
Mhm.
but consumption of fragrance as a whole. Because I mean, the amount of conversations that I have with people, with down to the concentration of a scent, they aren't aware of these things, and they're going to like big fashion houses, like major brands like Marc Jacobs and Dior, and they don't know the difference in composition or why one fragrance lasts longer than the other. It's not just because this fragrance costs more that it's going to last long. You actually have to know that this is an Eau de Toilette. So when you spray this scent, there's so much more alcohol composition in this fragrance. It's not going to last nearly as long as an extrait de parfum would.
Right.
So I think taking the time to educate people, um, and really just teaching them about the ins and outs of what quality fragrance is, how notes and accords work with their body chemistry, and recognizing like, a fragrance is more than just a scent. It's a story in a bottle. So when you're buying a fragrance, you really have to understand what it is that you're looking for, what you're getting into, and how these notes and accords are going to work with your body. So if you were to go and buy a fragrance that you see people raving about, just because it works well with their body chemistry doesn't mean it will with yours.
That's true. That's true. Curious. So you talk about on your website, you say every fragrance has a memory, every scent has a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is kind of like your favorite scent memory, and why?
Um, Without a doubt, is vanilla bourbon.
Mhm.
And the reason why vanilla bourbon is one of those fragrances that I have a very fond story with. So, uh, that was the second fragrance in my collection that I created.
Okay.
And I actually created this for my girlfriend. Now, when I created this fragrance, my focus was on creating a scent that I felt like it. So the first scent I smelled in the process of this was actually Tom Ford. Uh, it was, what was the name?
Was it
The
tobacco
name is slipping
vanilla?
my mind. Yes, tobacco vanille. That's the fragrance that I smelled. And when I smelled tobacco vanille, it was interesting because this is the first time I had smelled a vanilla that mixed an element of smoky and tobacco with a sweetness to it at the same time. It was very
Wow.
savory. That was a fragrance that she really enjoyed. So I felt like it was a challenge for me to create something, with my own knowledge and my own composition that kind of embodied this element of a unique take on vanilla. And the creation of vanilla bourbon was the answer to that. When I made the first composition and I gave her like the first sample, I let her try it on her wrist. She smelled it and she was in love immediately. And
Nice.
I think that was confirmation for me that, um, I had literally created something that was not only unique, but this is something that I feel like I could use to describe not only her, but lots of different types of people. Um, and I think that when I look at like my journey with fragrance as a whole, when I started creating fragrances and selling them, my goal was to connect people in scent. And I think that when you create a fragrance that matches a personality, that makes somebody feel heard and felt in scent, when they walk out in the world wearing that kind of fragrance, there's a level of inspiration and confidence that follows them because they know this is me. I feel confident in what I'm wearing. It's like when you find clothes that fit you perfectly. You feel amazing. There's no words that you can use to describe that experience. It's just something that people can see, they feel, and they experience that from you. And when I created Vanilla Bourbon, that's exactly what I saw in her. And I felt like when it comes down to the creation of scent, that's definitely something that I ascribe and I aspire to do with every fragrance.
Now, in when telling that story and what you brought about, it brought something to my mind. I hear a lot of perfumers say that they don't smell other people's fragrances, so they don't want to be biased on what they do. But you kind of said the opposite, that you were smelling tobacco vanille and that inspired you. And your fragrance smells nothing like tobacco vanille,
Right.
but that it inspired you to make a fragrance. So smelling other fragrances doesn't bother you in a sense when you're making your own.
No, I think that sometimes I take inspiration in notes, but as far as like full compositions, I always take my fragrances in a completely different direction than other perfumers. And I think that's probably one of my biggest goals, to make sure that when I'm creating a scent, that this isn't something that you've ever come across before.
Nice.
And I mean, at times I think like overconsumption of other fragrances definitely can cloud your vision and your view, because I mean, for me, sometimes it's a visionary sport. I could go to sleep and wake up with like a composition on my mind, thinking, how do I create this fragrance that I have in my head, this scent or this smell that I'm envisioning in my mind? How do I draw this into reality? And you know, sometimes that might be something that I smelled previously if I'm smelling a lot of fragrances, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I think there's like a balance to it for sure.
Okay. Out of all the notes and ingredients that you worked with, what in your mind was the strangest or most unexpected ingredient that you've used in a fragrance?
I would say patchouli. I actually didn't like it in the beginning. I really didn't like patchouli at all. I felt like it was very earthy. I would smell it in incense, and it was just like, how am I going to tame this note in a fragrance to a point where I'm actually going to enjoy it? And um, it's interesting. Now I love it because of the way that I've been able to use it in my scents. Um, but that's a good question. I probably have to think about that. Outside of like patchouli, what else was really, really interesting to work with? I would say oud as well. Oud and musk, both of those were really, really interesting for me to work with. And I would say that because I didn't like oud or musk either. And oud is super, super powerful. Like when you're dealing with the raw concentrate of oud, that stuff lasts on your skin for days. Um, and I spent a lot of time in different mosques and masjids, and it's like when you're in these spaces, you smell different iterations of oud, of musk. You'll smell a white musk. You'll smell a floral musk. You'll even smell like fruity and gourmand musks as well, like different siyages. And I think that coming across like different iterations of like musk and oud really inspired me to try to create my own take on oud and musk. And say for example, like catalyst, like even though it's aromatic, there's definitely an air of musk and oud in in that fragrance. Both of them are,
Absolutely.
and it's like I think the synthesis of this fragrance is the perfect iteration of like a combination of aromatic, musky with a hint of oud in there as well. And that's where you kind of get that that Middle Eastern feel from the fragrance.
Absolutely. So, if you were to expand into any other sensory product like candles, body care, would you ever consider doing that? And if so, what would that be?
So I have expanded into candles. Um, I intend to build a world about around my fragrances, for sure. And that's why it takes so much time to develop each scent, and it takes me so long to put out new fragrances because these are scents that I want to make sure really present as a signature scent. Because you can't build a world around a phase, you can't build a world around a moment. Nobody's going to want to put on a vanilla bourbon based lotion if this is something that they only like for a few days, right? This is something that they're wearing on a constant basis. Like to put on the lotion, to want the soap, to want a candle on top of that. There has to be real desire, real love behind that product. So my goal is definitely to create a world around the full entire collection.
Nice, nice. So we have 5 in your collection right now. Are there any new fragrances that you're planning on introducing this year?
So I am working on a new composition right now. There are two different fragrances that I am trying to create in my mind. So like when it comes down to creating a scent, sometimes I have to put the puzzle pieces together in my mind first. What
Okay.
is it that I'm trying to go for? What feel am I trying to capture? And who am I trying to describe with this scent? And right now, I mentioned it previously, but I'm working with rose and oud.
Okay.
That is one note that I'm really, really, really fascinated with. And well, two notes that I'm fascinated with. And the other is a surprise. So I'm not releasing that one just yet. That's the
Rose and Oud
only.
is a good one though. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see. So I've gotten this twice. There's somebody asking, is there a discount code?
Yes. If you use the discount, so the discount code is actually called subscriber. I'll put it in the comments. One
Okay.
moment. And also, if you go on the website and you put in your email, you'll get the discount code sent directly to your email. So instead of having to just like type it out, you get it sent directly to you. So just head over to the website aromas.com, put your email in, and you'll get the discount code sent to you.
Okay.
Yes. Actually, I wanted to answer that question at the top.
Sure. That's why I put it up there.
Yeah. So I do travel to different parts of the world, mainly to experience different fragrances and notes because I feel like a lot of it is just like experience based. So when I'm smelling different things and I'm creating new memories, that is literally what helps me process how am I going to enter into a new phase with fragrance. So I'm actually I'm going on a trip after this month with the intention of smelling different notes and accords for that exact reason.
Nice. So I just put up on the other side, on the IG side, because there was somebody that asked about where it is, and then you can find. Let's see, on IG at Coroma's Aroma. All right. Um, I had put layering up there because somebody had told me that layering was a thing that you definitely talked about in some of the people that you sold your fragrances to. What are you, I guess, what's your feelings about layering and how do you layer your fragrances?
I would say layering is essential. And I feel like layering is important because this is one way that you can absolutely delineate yourself from everyone else in fragrance. When it comes down to fragrance combinations, the first fragrance combination that I was really, really, really taken by was the way that Catalyst and Ivada Vanille come together to create a full circle experience. So they're both amber based fragrances and they both have an element of vanilla. And I feel like those two tie the fragrances well, they basically tie the fragrances together very well. So I would say Evada Vanilla is more on the rich and spicy side, whereas Catalyst is more amber based. It's more aromatic. So when you bring these two together, you have an aromatic spice that's very, very fresh, very clean, and the sillage presents itself. It projects very, very well.
Nice.
Another combination that I'm really, really, really in love with right now is the combination of vanilla bourbon and trance. Um, they're both Tunisian patchouli based. So when you take a lavender, vanilla, bergamot, and vetiver combined with a vanilla and Tunisian patchouli, these two come together for a very, very strong sillage. To the point where I would think that this might be the most projecting combination that I have. Um, I always get compliments wearing this together, and I felt like trance within itself is a very strong scent, and so is vanilla bourbon. So when you combine the two, it's very powerful. Very.
Nice. Nice. We got another one, a question from Esteban saying, are Gourmand fragrances getting out of hand, or are you enjoying the direction Gourmands are going in?
I think that sometimes gourmand fragrances definitely can go and get a bit out of hand, depending on the fragrance house and how well they're able to capture some of these fragrances. I think that um, it honestly depends on what you're looking for in scent. I think that a lot of like heavy, heavy, heavy gourmand based fragrance houses are creating fragrances for a specific type of consumer. And I think for them, it works very well. I think for me, I have a different take on gourmand. I think that there's like multiple layers and elements to my fragrances where I consider some of my fragrances like gourmand. Some others may feel like they aren't. So I think it's something that's really left heavily up to interpretation. But um, I don't know. I think that as a whole, gourmand fragrances and creating fragrances that mimic things that we eat. Um, I don't know. I enjoy it personally. That's why like I would say like a Montmorency and a vanilla bourbon are two fragrances that I would absolutely describe as like a gourmand scent in my own collection.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, but going like very, very deep into like directions where it's like that's the only element, like it literally just smells like a food and only that. I think me personally, that's not something that I'm interested in for my perfumery.
Yeah, there's a lot of now gourmand. Gourmand seems to be the thing that's in right now. So there are a lot of fragrances that replicate different scents in food and desserts and stuff like that. It's I guess it's a big popular thing right now.
It definitely is.
If you could give one message to fragrance lovers and collectors, what would it be?
Um, I would say that when it comes down to fragrance, only you know what really speaks to you. And I think diving deeper into what those notes and what those accords are when it comes down to you saying, I want to honor my skin with this scent. I think diving deeper into those stories, the creation process, the intention behind the fragrance, opposed to just consuming notes and accords just because I see this brand does, etc. Like diving into the story is extremely important. And knowing the intention behind that fragrance is definitely something that, as a whole, I think the fragrance industry, whether it be um, producers, perfumers, consumers, and connoisseurs alike, like really getting an understanding of those stories is important. Especially now that so many brands are putting out just fragrances, large collections that have such a wide array. Definitely taking time to look at those stories and the reasonings. Why? What is the why? Who are you creating this for, and what are these fragrances meant to do outside of like the generic reasons?
Okay. You definitely, this is going to get on a personal level. You are probably the coolest young man that I've ever seen. He's just like, you're just like stuck
Thank you.
on chill. So what has been the influence of why is your personality like that? It's just like you don't get rattled at all.
Uh, I mean, that's just that. I feel like that's just who I am and how I want to show up in the world. I think I would say I'm a pretty down to earth person, and my goal is really just to connect with as many people as possible. I think that's one of the main reasons why I'm here, and collecting perspective, enhancing, learning from perspective in general, and then applying it to like my artistry. That's what I love to do, and I think that that's only feasible when you have an open mind, when you are very attentive and present in the moment. And I think that that's also a part of the motto, like power and passion and presence. Like me as a whole, I think just taking the time to be lasered in the present, interacting with people and paying
Mhm.
close attention to detail makes the biggest difference.
Cool. So besides making perfume, what else? What else do you do? What are your hobbies? What other things are you into?
I
I think
love,
you lift. Looking at your
I do.
pictures, I think you
I
do go to
do.
the gym.
Yeah, I love lifting. I love reading. I love hiking, um, seeing new things, traveling. Like, I'm really just an experience-based person. I
Mhm.
want to experience as much as I can with the time that I have here, and I think that exposing myself to as much as possible is important. Like a lot of people don't know this about me, but growing up, I acted, um, I did ballet. Like I've exposed myself to a lot of different areas of artistry, and I think that contributes to why I pay so much close attention to detail in the fragrances that I'm creating, and the way that I show up, and the way that I communicate with people, because all of these aspects of artistry have contributed to the way that I push and I like I would say not just push but like my approach to everything that it is that I do, that I put my mind to.
Cool, cool. So over on the IG side, Rockboy T talked about Montmorency. Sounds like his speed. What I can say is that was the first one that caught my attention, and that was the first one that I had as my scent of the day. People may not know, but Mount Montmorency is a type of cherry, and I imagine that's where you got the name from, and that's how it
Absolutely.
came out. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
it's a different type of cherry. It's a sweet, but it's a tart cherry, and I really get that olfactory experience in that mixed with the rose. To me, it's a beautiful fragrance. And Rock Boy, I think you would like that really a whole lot.
Montmorency is really a one of one experience. I think when I think about like the fragrances that are really, really mass appealing, for sure it's between vanilla bourbon and Montmorency. Those two fragrances really, really do speak to a wide range of people. And I think that overall, um, they're definitely fragrances that you've never smelled before.
Yeah, we're getting balloons. I didn't know that happened on the StreamYard side. I know IG happens. Like if you put your thumb up, maybe
Yeah.
nothing's
I don't know
happening for
how
me.
that's happening.
But that's the second time, but I guess it's happening on your side. It doesn't work for me, I guess.
Yeah.
But there you go. Okay, so what legacy do you hope to leave in the world of fragrances?
Um, that's a great question. So my goal in fragrance is very large. So outside of being able to, teach people that more than anything, culture is what inspires luxury, right? That's one of the biggest messages behind my brand. But I also want to have a positive impact on the supply chain within the fragrance industry. So Africa is a major exporter of raw products, raw materials that make the fragrance industry a possibility. where we draw on these extracts, right? And where is the actual production of fragrance houses and reinvesting into the countries that make the fragrance industry as a whole a possibility? So one of my goals is actually doing that,
Nice.
reinvesting into the spaces that source the products that make this industry a possibility, and actually putting people that look like me in the position to create their own fragrance houses as a whole, because fragrance is a form of storytelling. And when the French own the full experience for the most part in the industry, like there is the fragrance industry as a whole is about a $70 billion industry, right? And how much capital within that is going towards black owned fragrance houses? Very, very small percentages.
Mm-hmm.
And that within itself, like the industry is growing every year. So I feel like creating opportunity for people that look like me in this industry is extremely important, because there are so many stories that me, myself, I will never be able to tell them all. I won't. We all have our own intricate experiences with notes and accords. Whenever you smell a scent, whenever you smell a note, you have a memory, a story, a person, a place attached to that. And being able to share that with people is priceless. So to answer your question, building a positive supply chain across the United States to Africa, and putting people in the position, people that look like me in position to create fragrance is my main goal.
So that kind of leads into, I guess, one of the last questions. What advice would you give to aspiring perfumers and entrepreneurs?
I would say that if you want to get into fragrance, make sure that it's something that's coming from the heart. Because I think to sell fragrance and to be in the fragrance industry, you really have to be passionate about it. It can't be something that you're just deciding to do because you think that it's profitable, the industry is growing, so you have placement. I think to be very intentional in this industry is going to make the biggest difference, because consumers can tell the difference. They can tell the difference. And, when you have a real reason, people can feel that, and it's inspiring. So anything is possible so long as you put your mind to it. But being able to create real value for people, that's the real prize in the game more than anything. At least that's what I feel.
Okay. I'm not exactly understanding this question, but what is you from Coroma's Aroma? If you're saying what did I get from Coroma's Aroma, I can tell you the first two that I bought were Montmorency and Ivada Vanille, yeah, Ivada Vanille. So those were the first two. If there's a different part of that question, just let me know. But those were the first two. But we were talking, and I think sooner or later I'm gonna have all five of them. I'm talking about ordering Catalyst very shortly, and I love vanilla bourbon and trance. I really like all of them. So I will, and then I've just started layering, and I'm not a big layering person, but when I found out that he recommends layering some of them together, I actually today, the reason why I didn't do a scent of the day is because I was trying different layering combinations with the actual decants I got. If you can tell, I have basically used Montmorency up.
Yeah.
So and you can see a full. I haven't used vanilla bourbon as much, but Montmorency is definitely. I can't wait till I get my bottle.
Definitely give that vanilla bourbon and trance a try. It's one of a kind.
Yeah, I've been kind of experimenting with them today and layering, and I'm gonna keep doing that. And I will definitely be buying the rest of the set to make it a full set. Plus, I got to have the whole spectrum of the colors there.
Yeah.
Just like the thumbnail, I want to put it on. Presentation is something that I really appreciate in someone who takes the time to make sure that their bottle presentation is as nice as the fragrance. I know there's a lot of people that will say, "Oh, it's all about the juice. It's all about the juice." It is. It is about the juice, but having a good presentation to me speaks volumes of how you want to represent yourself to the world. And I definitely believe that that is part of just the whole brand. It's not just about the fragrance, because you can get fragrances that are in hideous bottles. Like some of the clones that come out, the bottles are hideous. The juice may not smell bad, but the bottles are so bad I don't even want to put them on the shelf. I hide them.
You know what's interesting? I actually was at a point where I wasn't as focused on the presentation. I was literally just focused on the fragrance. And I did a collaboration with Red Rooster in, I think, 2023. And you know, at that point, I didn't even have any specific branding on my products. It was just the fragrance more than anything, and I was just trying to experiment and see how like people responded to it. And I got a lot of feedback. Um, Obviously, people are interacting with the product. They love the fragrances, but it's like, okay, where is the deeper like representation of how and what this means? Like, how am I really going to interact with the packaging? And I took the time to really draw on like what my inspirations were, and you know, where and how am I going to apply deeper levels of intention behind these fragrances that fully immerse the story and the experience for like consumers. And that's how I arrived at the point of like creating a full experience with the fragrances. When you look at it, like you already know that you're in for something.
Absolutely.
You're in for something interesting.
Wonderful. So I definitely can tell you I was introduced to James and Karoma's Aroma during Black Owned Fragrance Week. I saw his interview, I think it was with Terrence Sr. And
Yes.
like I said, he's stuck on chill. I said, this is the coolest young man that I've seen, and he's making fragrances. Gotta get a discovery set. And after I got the discovery set, I did a live and actually tagged him and let him know, hey, I did a live on your discovery set. And that's when I decided that I wanted to actually get to the subscribers and the followers to let you know about his brand, about his story. And I'm glad that we had the time to be able to put it on.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Telling the story behind the brand and the product and my inspirations behind the fragrance is extremely important to me. So I'm grateful to be here.
Any last words you wanna give on who you are, how you perceive, what you want people to take away? Your last words.
I would say that when it comes down to fragrance, when it comes down to artistry as a whole, I think that it's very easy to look at people and say, this is what a perfumer looks like. This is what in a painter looks like. And I think that more than anything, we really need to start looking, and I would say not just looking, but restructuring our perspective on what a specific professional in this industry looks like, and really honing in on the quality and the value that these people are able to provide more than anything. I don't think there's a specific like model that you could say, okay, this is what this person looks like, or you have to be this age to get into this industry. Anything is possible when you have the drive, when you have the focus, the diligence, and the intention set to making sure that you're providing value for the people and the consumers that you plan to reach. So I would say breaking stigmas, break stigmas, challenge the status quo. And if you believe in your ability to do so, do it full throttle. That's exactly what I'm doing. And what I will say is, you know, I'm in the process of growing and expanding my brand awareness. But in a few years, you will see my product all over the world. And there are very key reasons why.
Nice, nice. So everybody, you got a chance to be introduced or presented, if you already know about them, to Karoma's Aroma and James Koroma, the owner and perfumer. Hope you enjoyed the video. We're going to go out with a song, the actual theme song of the Fragrance Connoisseurs, and we'll see you next time. We're actually going to have a live tomorrow talking about clones versus OG with a panel of 6 people, so it should be interesting. Can't wait. It will be an experience. I appreciate it, James. Honestly, I appreciate you coming on, and I really did respect and admire you for what you've done, and that's why I wanted to get the Discovery set, and that's why I wanted to get you on the channel.
Thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate it.
It is CoromasAroma.com, or on IG, it's at CoromasAroma, and you can get more information from there. If you get on the website, he told you subscribe is the actual discount code. So there you have it, guys.
Thank you so much.
Hang on just for a second after the end of the stream, and then I just want to say bye to you. And
all right, sounds good.
Everybody, have a good night.
And I sniff it to all the people who like frags like Charm City does. Made this track so you really know what live was. Come together over fragrances. That's the why, cuz getting love and support from the vibers. Put your sense of the day in the chat, cuz no wrong sense where whatever and for just because. Positivity and love with a live hug. A life full of fragrance is what I love. Finding hidden gems from Dior to Roja Dove. Negativity and fighting is what we're above. Try to diss, we throw up a hand with a big shrug. Like a card of positives, it's a plus love. If you wanna cause drama, we won't even think of us. The connoisseurs fly high like a dove. And I sniff it, yes you can. 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 I sniff it. With my frags that I can spray in layers. A connoisseur, but also a poem sayer. At times a live studio purveyor. Won't choke you out, but not a sissy sprayer. Hit the like, you'll be doing us a really big favor. Subscribe if this track has a lot of flavor. Rest in peace, Fife Dog, who's resting with our savior. Follow us for the fragrance behavior. Make a note of the fragrances we gave you, one by one, or apply them in layers. Do you like the fragrances we share? Keep an open mind, don't be a naysayer. Find some new frags that you can savor. Doesn't matter if you're minor or major. From niche to designer, we're the player. As you inhale like a breath of fresh air.